The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the salty ocean breeze as the sun cast its golden glow over Santa Monica Boulevard. The city was alive, tourists snapping photos, street performers juggling fire, and the usual hum of morning traffic. Among the early risers was Ethan Cole, a 32-year-old janitor working the morning shift at a high-end corporate building in downtown Los Angeles. Life had never been kind to Ethan. Once a promising college student, he had dropped out after his mother fell ill, drowning in medical bills that never seemed to stop. With no degree and a pile of debt, he had taken whatever jobs he could find, barely scraping by in a one-bedroom apartment in South Central. It was a typical morning for Ethan, mopping floors, emptying trash bins, and wiping down desks of people who barely acknowledged his existence. His shift ended at 8 a.m., and he liked to take the scenic route home, passing through Beverly Hills just to remind himself of the life he would never have. But today was different. As he walked past an alley near Rodeo Drive, something caught his eye, a black duffel bag sitting inside a public dustbin. It wasn't just any bag, it looked expensive, out of place among the garbage. At first, he thought it might belong to a homeless person, but something about the way it was placed, hidden but not too deep, made him curious, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. Ethan hesitantly pulled the bag out. It was heavier than he expected. His heart pounded as he unzipped it slightly, stacks of $100 bills. Neatly packed. Crisp. Unmarked, his breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just some forgotten gym bag. This was a fortune. Ethan's hands shook as he zipped the bag back up. His first instinct was to look around. Was this a setup? Was someone watching him? The alley was empty except for an old homeless man rummaging through another trash can a few feet away. He considered leaving the bag right there. But then he thought about his overdue rent, his mother's unfinished hospital bills, the student loans that haunted him like a ghost. This money could change everything. He took the bag. By the time he reached his apartment, his heart was still racing. Locking the door behind him, he placed the bag on his small, second-hand coffee table and unzipped it completely. $1 million. In cash. Who in the world leaves $1 million in a trash can? Ethan knew one thing for sure: this money wasn't clean. No one dumps $1 million unless something's seriously wrong. But what if it was meant for him? Ethan decided to keep the money. At first, he was cautious. He didn't spend anything, just hid the bag under his bed. Days passed. Then a week. No one came knocking. No news reports about missing money. Then the paranoia set in. Strange things started happening. A black SUV parked across the street from his building. A man in a suit sitting at the same diner he always went to, pretending to read a newspaper. His landlord mentioned that two men had come by asking about him. Someone was watching. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan grabbed the duffel bag and counted again. All the money was still there. But as he shuffled through the stacks, something slipped out, a small folded note, almost hidden between the bills. It had only 3 words: "Do not run." Ethan's blood turned to ice. Someone knew he had the money. Someone had put that note in there, waiting for him to find it. Had they been watching the whole time? Panic took over. He grabbed the bag and shoved it into his backpack. If someone was watching, he couldn't stay in his apartment. He needed to move, but as he reached for the doorknob, a knock echoed through the silence, a slow, deliberate knock. He froze. Whoever was outside wasn't an ordinary visitor. The knocking stopped. Ethan stood still, his breath shallow. Minutes passed. When he finally gathered the courage to look through the peephole, the hallway was empty, but on the ground lay a white envelope. Inside was another note: "You have 48 hours. Meet me at the Blue Orchid. Come alone." No name. No details. Just a time, midnight. Ethan had no choice. That night, he took the bag and made his way to the Blue Orchid, an upscale lounge in the heart of Los Angeles. As he stepped inside, his eyes scanned the room. Then he saw him, a man in his 60s, sharp suit, silver hair, and piercing blue eyes. He sat alone at a booth, sipping whiskey as if he had been expecting Ethan all along. The moment their eyes met, the man gestured for him to sit. Ethan slid into the seat, his hands gripping the bag tightly. The man smiled. "You found my money." Ethan's mouth went dry. "Who are you?" The man took another sip before answering. "The question isn't who I am. The question is, why did I leave it?" Ethan's fingers twitched under the table. The lounge was dimly lit, but the intensity in the man's icy blue eyes made it feel like a spotlight was on him. "I don't know why you left it," Ethan admitted, trying to keep his voice steady. "But I want to." The man smirked, as if Ethan had just passed some invisible test. He leaned back, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "Most people would have turned it into the police. Some would have spent it recklessly," he said. "But you sat on it. You watched. You observed. That tells me you're cautious." Ethan's mind raced. Was this some kind of trap? "Who are you?" Ethan pressed. The man ignored the question. "That money wasn't abandoned. It was placed there on purpose. And you weren't the only one who noticed." Ethan tensed. The man slid a phone across the table. The screen lit up with security footage, grainy, black and white, but unmistakable. It showed Ethan pulling the bag out of the trash can. "We've been watching you," the man continued. "And we're not the only ones." Ethan's stomach turned. He had known someone was watching, but hearing it confirmed sent a cold chill down his spine. "Who else is watching?" Ethan asked. The man smiled. "The kind of people who don't ask questions. They just take." Ethan's heart pounded. He had thought he was being careful. But if others had seen him take the money, he was already in danger. "So, what do you want from me?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. The man leaned in, his smile never fading. "A favor." Ethan stared at him. "A favor? What kind of favor?" The man lifted his glass and took a slow sip before answering. "The money was bait," he said simply. "A test to see who would take it. You passed." Ethan clenched his fists under the table. "You're saying this was all an experiment?" "Not exactly," the man said. "Let's call it an audition." Ethan frowned. "For what?" The man's smile widened. "To see if you have what it takes to survive." The word sent a fresh wave of unease through Ethan. "I don't like the sound of that." "Good," the man said, standing up. "That means you're smart. And being smart is the only thing that'll keep you alive." Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "You still haven't answered my question," he said. "Who are you?" The man straightened his suit, then leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm the man who decides who gets to walk away." And with that, he walked out, leaving Ethan sitting alone with $1 million. And a feeling that he had just stepped into something much bigger than himself. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The man's words echoed in his head. "You're not the only one who noticed." Who else was watching? What had he gotten himself into? He considered returning the money, leaving it somewhere and walking away. But something told him it was already too late for that. By morning, the decision was made for him. A loud bang shook his apartment door, not a knock. A kick. Ethan's stomach dropped. He barely had time to react before another bang came, and then another. The door frame cracked. They were breaking in. Ethan grabbed the bag and bolted for the fire escape. As he scrambled onto the metal ladder, he heard the door finally give way. Voices. Rough. Angry. Searching, he climbed as fast as he could, adrenaline surging through his veins. By the time he reached the alley below, a black SUV screeched around the corner. A man in a black mask jumped out, gun. Ethan ran. Ethan weaved through the back streets, his lungs burning. He could hear the footsteps behind him, fast and relentless. Who were these people? What did they want? The answer was obvious. The money, $1 million, was enough to make men ruthless. Ethan turned a corner and spotted an open subway entrance. His only chance, he bolted down the stairs, leaping over the turnstile as he heard gunfire erupt behind him. A bullet sparked off the metal railing, people screamed. Ethan shoved his way through the crowd, sprinting for the next train. Just as the doors started to close, he dived inside. The last thing he saw before the train pulled away was the masked man, standing on the platform, staring at him, watching. This wasn't over, not even close. The subway rattled as it sped through the underground tunnel. Ethan's chest heaved, his heart beat a violent drum in his ears. He clutched the duffel bag tightly, his mind racing. Who were those men? And more importantly, who was the billionaire? He glanced around the subway car. A few commuters sat quietly, either staring at their phones or lost in thought. But one man stood out, a man in a navy blue suit, sitting at the far end of the train. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't reading, he was looking at Ethan. Ethan's pulse quickened. Was he with them? The train slowed as they approached the next station. The suited man stood up. Ethan didn't wait. The moment the doors hissed open, he darted out, pushing past people on the platform. The suited man followed. Ethan sprinted up the stairs into the crowded Los Angeles streets. No time to think. No time to plan. He needed to disappear. Ethan ran for 3 blocks before ducking into a small diner. He slid into a booth, trying to slow his breathing. The bell above the door jingled. The suited man had followed him inside. Ethan gripped the strap of the duffel bag. He had to get out, now, but just as he was about to move, a voice came from behind him. "Hey, buddy. You look like you need a ride." Ethan turned. A woman in her late 20s stood there, holding car keys. She had sharp green eyes and a confident smirk. "Who are you?" Ethan asked warily. "Someone who doesn't like the guys chasing you," she said. "Now, you coming or not?" The suited man was getting closer. Ethan made a choice. He followed her out. The woman led Ethan to a black Mustang parked by the curb. She slid into the driver's seat and started the engine with a roar. "Buckle up," she said. Ethan barely had time to close the door before she floored it. The Mustang shot forward, weaving through traffic. "Mind telling me who you are?" Ethan asked, gripping the dashboard. "Name's Riley Quinn," she said. "And you just stepped into the middle of something very dangerous." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Yeah, I kinda figured." Riley took a sharp turn onto an empty side street, then parked. She turned to him. "That bag you're carrying? You need to get rid of it. Fast." Ethan shook his head. "Not until I know why that billionaire left it for me." Riley sighed. "That wasn't just money, Ethan. That was an invitation." "To what?" Riley hesitated. "To a game. A deadly one." Ethan frowned. "What kind of game?" Riley looked around, as if making sure no one was listening. "The man who left that money. People call him the Phantom. No one knows his real name. No one knows his face. But he's one of the richest men in the world. And he plays games with people like us." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Why?" "No one knows," Riley said. "Some say he's testing people. Others think he's just bored." Ethan exhaled slowly. "So what happens now?" Riley looked at him seriously. "You have 2 choices. Walk away from the money and try to disappear. Or play the game." Ethan swallowed. He knew the answer before he even said it. "I don't think I have a choice." Riley nodded. "Then we better start playing." The black Mustang idled in the dimly lit alley. Ethan sat in the passenger seat, gripping the duffel bag like a lifeline. Riley tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, deep in thought. "If we're doing this, you need to understand something," she finally said. "This game? It's not about winning. It's about surviving." Ethan swallowed. "Then tell me the rules." Riley glanced at him, her green eyes serious. "There are only 3. She held up her fingers one by one. Rule 1, you can't quit. Once you take the money, you're in. Walking away is not an option. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. And if I try? Riley's lips pressed into a thin line. People who try disappear. Ethan inhaled sharply. So that's why the billionaire left the money in the trash. Once someone picked it up, they were marked. Chosen, Riley continued. Rule 2, there will be challenges. The Phantom will test you. Some tests will be about intelligence. Others? Life and death. Ethan's fingers clenched around the duffel bag. And the last rule? Riley took a deep breath. Rule 3, trust no one. Before Ethan could respond, a sudden buzz filled the car. Riley glanced at her phone. Her expression darkened. He's already started. She turned the screen toward Ethan. A text message flashed across it. The first challenge begins now. You have 1 hour. Fail, and you lose more than just the money. Beneath the message was an address, Westwood Cemetery. Ethan's stomach dropped. A graveyard? Riley was already shifting gears. Looks like we're going on a field trip. The Mustang sped through the Los Angeles streets, weaving past cars. Ethan sat in tense silence, his mind racing. What kind of challenge are we expecting? He asked. Riley shook her head. Could be anything. But whatever it is, it won't be simple. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to Westwood Cemetery. The place was eerily quiet, the only movement coming from trees swaying in the breeze, as Ethan stepped out of the car. His phone vibrated, a new message, find a grave with the answer. Fail, and someone dies. His breath hitched. Someone dies? Riley's jaw tightened. He's not bluffing. Ethan's heart pounded. He scanned the tombstones, searching for something, anything, that stood out. Then he saw it, a fresh grave. The tombstone bore an engraving, money means nothing if you don't know how to use it. Beneath it, a name, Elijah Carter, Elijah Carter. Ethan had never heard the name before. But something about it felt important. What now? He whispered. Riley's phone buzzed. She read the message, her face turning pale. You found the grave. But you weren't fast enough. Someone has paid the price. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't a game, it was a nightmare. The ride back was silent. Ethan stared out the window, guilt gnawing at him. Someone had died because he wasn't fast enough. Who was Elijah Carter? He finally asked. Riley gripped the steering wheel tighter. A warning. A warning? She nodded. The Phantom leaves names as a way to remind players that every choice has consequences. Ethan exhaled slowly. So what happens now? Riley glanced at him. Now? We wait for the next test. Ethan sat in the passenger seat of Riley's Mustang, staring at the city lights blurring past. His mind was a battlefield of thoughts. Someone had died, he had taken too long at the graveyard, and now someone had paid the price. He clenched his fists. He wasn't going to let that happen again. Riley finally spoke. You need to understand something, Ethan. The Phantom doesn't pick people at random. There's a reason you were chosen. Ethan shook his head. I don't know any billionaires. I'm nobody. Riley smirked. Not anymore. She pulled into a parking garage and killed the engine. You need rest. We'll figure out our next move in the morning. Ethan exhaled and nodded. But deep down, he knew there would be no sleep tonight. It was past midnight when Ethan's phone buzzed. A new message, unknown number. Elijah Carter isn't just a warning. He was the last player. And he left you a message before he died. Ethan's throat tightened, his fingers trembled as he typed back. Who is this? No response. Then, another message came through. If you want to survive, go to 511 Baxter Street. Alone. Ethan stared at the screen. His instincts screamed trap, but if Elijah Carter had left him something, he had to find out what. Ethan slipped out of the hotel room while Riley was asleep. He took only his phone and a knife he found in the kitchen drawer. Baxter Street was in an industrial part of town. He found the address, a rundown warehouse with shattered windows and a rusted entrance. He hesitated, then, slowly, he stepped inside. The warehouse was silent. Dust floated in the moonlight streaming through holes in the roof. Then, movement. A laptop sat on an old wooden table in the center of the room. Its screen glowed. A video file was open. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The video was paused on a man's face. Elijah Carter. Ethan hit play. The video crackled to life. Elijah Carter looked ragged, his face covered in sweat. His eyes darted around like a hunted animal. If you're watching this, it means I didn't make it. Ethan's heart pounded. You've been chosen by the Phantom. That means you're in the game now. And if you don't listen carefully, you're dead. Elijah leaned closer to the camera. There is no prize. No jackpot at the end. There's only one way out. Ethan leaned in, gripping the table. What is it? He whispered. Elijah's voice dropped to a whisper. You have to find out who the Phantom is. And you have to kill him. The screen went black. Ethan's hands shook. Kill the Phantom? How could he kill a man no one had ever seen? A click sounded behind him. Ethan spun. A masked man stood in the shadows, a gun raised. You shouldn't have come here. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. Then, bang, a shot rang out, but Ethan wasn't hit. The masked man collapsed. Riley stood behind him, gun smoking. She locked eyes with Ethan. I told you. Trust no one. Ethan stared at the masked man's lifeless body, his mind racing. The metallic scent of gunpowder lingered in the air. Riley lowered her gun but didn't relax. You really don't listen, do you? She snapped. Ethan swallowed hard. I had to know. Riley sighed, rubbing her temples. And now you do. Elijah Carter wasn't just another player. He was trying to take the Phantom down. And now, that job falls on you. Ethan's pulse pounded. How was he supposed to kill someone who controlled the entire game? Riley grabbed his wrist. We have to go. Now. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. They slipped into the night, leaving behind the dead man and the eerie glow of the laptop. Somewhere out there, the Phantom was watching. They barely made it 2 blocks before Ethan's phone vibrated. Unknown number. You disappoint me, Ethan. A cold chill ran through his spine. Another message followed. I gave you an opportunity. And instead of playing, you're plotting against me? Ethan's breath caught. The Phantom knew. Riley grabbed his phone, reading the messages. He's taunting you. Another text came through. You have one last chance to prove yourself. Or the next bullet won't miss. Then, a final message. Check your back pocket. Ethan's hand flew to his jeans. His fingers touched something cold. A key. Attached was a note. Sunset Towers. Room 903. Be there in 1 hour. Riley cursed under her breath. This is a setup. Ethan exhaled sharply. I know. But they had no choice. Sunset Towers was a luxury high-rise in downtown Los Angeles. They arrived with 10 minutes to spare. Ethan stared up at the towering building. If we go in there, we might not come out. Riley checked her gun. Then let's make sure we go in prepared. They took the elevator up. The ride was agonizingly slow. The higher they went, the tighter Ethan's chest felt. Ding, the doors slid open, the single hallway stretched before them. Room 903 was at the end. Ethan and Riley exchanged a glance. Then, he slid the key into the lock and turned it. Click, the door creaked open. The room was dark, except for a single laptop sitting on a table. Ethan took a cautious step forward. The screen flickered to life. The silhouette of a man appeared on the screen. Ethan's breath caught. The Phantom's face was blurred. His voice was altered, deep and robotic. Welcome, Ethan. Ethan clenched his fists. What do you want from me? The Phantom chuckled. I already told you. I test people. I shape them. Into what? Ethan growled. Survivors, the Phantom said. Winners. Ethan gritted his teeth. Then why do people die? A pause. Then, because not everyone is strong enough to play. Riley stepped forward. You don't choose winners. You create killers. The Phantom sighed. And yet, here you are. Still playing. Ethan's pulse pounded. This was it. His chance to get answers. Who are you? He demanded. The Phantom chuckled again. You're not ready for that answer. The screen went black, then, a voice whispered from the laptop speakers, the real game begins now. The laptop powered off. Ethan and Riley barely had time to react before Ethan's phone buzzed again. A new message, your next task, kill the man listed below. If you don't, you die instead. Ethan's hands shook as he read the name. His own, Ethan Reed, target. Riley's face paled. He's not giving you a mission. Ethan's throat tightened. He's putting a hit on me. Ethan and Riley raced through the city, darting through alleyways and back streets. The air was thick with tension. Riley's eyes kept darting to the shadows, on edge. Ethan felt the pressure mounting with every step. He was a marked man. Where do we go? Ethan asked, trying to steady his frantic breathing. Riley didn't answer at first. She just pulled him faster. We need to get to the building. The building? The one where it all started, Riley said. The place where the Phantom watched you. We can't run forever. We need to take the fight to him.
Please subscribe, like, comment and share this video. It means a lot to us. Thank you.